Welcome to episode 45 of the Empowering Ability Podcast.
Welcome to the Empowering Ability Podcast, where we get you and your loved ones impacted by disability the information needed to live a full and meaningful life. Now here's your host, Eric Gall.
Hey folks, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining today. I am super excited and also, to be honest, maybe feeling a little nervous or uneasy about this episode that I'm going to be sharing with you called Uncovering the Truth. We are oppressing people with disabilities. And I think the way that the reason why I'm feeling this way is there's many very powerful messages that guest Lynne Seagle, the CEO of Hope House Foundation out of Virginia in the United States, shares with me on this podcast. And I think that nervous feeling that I get is really when I think about the truth and how I've oppressed people with disabilities in the past, and the realizations that this podcast or this conversation with Lynne really helped me to uncover within myself. So I'm excited to share it with you because I hope it provides the same perspective for you that it provided for me, and helps you to realize some of those truths or beliefs that you might hold, and some perspectives that you might consider that might be a little different than the ones that you hold now. So Lynne joins us to share more about Hope House and the journey that they've been on, and she shares when they found out that people really didn't want to live in group homes, and how the model that they had created was oppressing people. And she talks about really just doing the right thing for the people that they serve to serve their needs and what they actually wanted, which was helping people to create a home of their own. And we also have a good conversation around how we are responsible for the oppression of people with disabilities, and it's our responsibility to do something about it. So I feel this is a very powerful conversation. It's one that I hope as many people as possible listen to. So if you find value out of this conversation, or it invokes some feeling within you, please share it with others. So without any more ado, here is Lynne Seagle. Hi, Lynne. Welcome to the Empowering Ability Podcast. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to have you on the podcast today. So Lynne is the executive director of Hope House in Virginia in the United States. And Lynne, I'm just going to kind of hand over the mic to you for a couple of minutes here. Mm-hmm. And could you just tell us maybe a little bit more about Hope House, and a little bit more about yourself and who you are?
Sure. Hope House Foundation is a not-for-profit organization that was started by family members about 45 years ago, 50 years ago. These family members were pretty much revolutionaries because at that time, the only thing really available for people who were adults with developmental or intellectual disabilities was institutions or large training centers, or living in the family home. And this small band of rabble-rousers or disruptors said, that's not good enough. Why aren't people with disabilities living in the neighborhoods? Why do they have to go away and be warehoused or live with people with shared labels but no shared interest? So they started the first group home in the state of Virginia and ran it themselves. I really like that history because I think we're still engaged in what they felt was a social justice issue and not a disability issue. We support 125 people, all of whom live in their own home. We have about 260 staff. About half of them are part-time. I've been with the organization I'm in my 38th year. So I started as a much younger woman, and never in my wildest dreams, if you'd asked me then, would I be here now? And upon reflection, I think what really that is about is I wanted to change the world. I was very attracted to changing the world, and especially changing the way that people with disabilities were isolated or not valued. What I didn't realize in my younger days was that work doesn't really have a stopping point, unfortunately, yet. It's a long journey, and stick-to-itness. I think that's what our founders had, and certainly I represent that as well.
I love that. And that's the first time I've heard the term rebel rousers, and I like it. Would you call yourself a rebel rouser?
Oh, I would. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's probably one of the nicer names.
You'd be happy if people called you that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think I love the ambition that you have to change the world and to make it a better place for people with developmental or intellectual disabilities. And I think that's what drew me to connect with you, Lynne, is in sharing that same purpose or common vision.
Yeah.
So this organization, Hope House, that you're leading, has gone through a tremendous amount of change. So first off, a visionary organization that started the first group home. So going from institutions to group homes, definitely a step in the right direction for people. But as you mentioned, you have 125 people living in their own home, which is quite an awesome thing. So can you, I guess, share with us, like, how did that transition happen?
Yes. So this was 1984, and we ask everyone in the organization, we're doing our annual satisfaction check-in. We ask everyone if they liked living where they were living. And at this point, we had 14 group homes, fairly large group homes, 8-bed or even a couple of 10 beds. And everyone said yes, they liked where they were living. And it is odd to ask 120-some folks one question and everybody answers it the same way, especially when it's a personalized question. It's not like, is it raining? Is it sunny? It was a personalized question. So we decided to reward it. And we reworded it changed it very slightly. And we asked, how do you want to live? And it opened the floodgates of very individualized and personalized responses. But they did fall, when we talked to everyone, they fell into 3 major categories. And the first and most dominant one was, I want my own home. That this group home, no matter how many times you tell me it's my home, I don't control who lives here. I don't control who works here. I don't control sometimes even what I eat or what I watch on TV. I don't own the key. This is not my home. This is your home. And that was shocking to us, because you can, especially when you're running congregate services, you can really get lulled into that you're fooling people. Your home is where I work, but still it's your home. And we weren't fooling anyone. And then the second theme was people wanted a job. A job with a paycheck, a job that had a diverse workforce, where most of the people in 1984, and in fact, still to this day, around the country, went to day centers or sheltered workshops or places, again, that everyone had a label of intellectual or developmentally disabled. And so there was nothing like that happening for people. And the third was, we put under the category of friendship and romance. People express this probably in the most unique ways, wanting to have someone call them up and ask them to go to a movie, and they weren't paid to be with them. A girlfriend, a boyfriend, getting married, some very modest and basic needs for around connection and belonging. So we were in those days we defined being exceptional and excellent based on the fact that we had no licensure violations, meaning we met all the rules. Our paperwork was clean and well organized and color coded. We had no employee grievances. We had low staff turnover. Our group homes were all in middle to upper class neighborhoods, beautiful homes, fine trimmed lawns and couches that matched the drapes. We just felt like this is what good services are. So when we kind of gathered all of these responses into these three themes, we audited all of our perfect program plans because Virginia held us up really as a model. And not one program plan for any of these individuals addressed them getting their own home, a real job, or unpaid relationships in their life, whether they be romantic or friendship. And that was a dark time for us because it was a long fall, because it requires you naturally to say, well, wait a minute. I mean, if your biggest stakeholders, if the people that have the most impact, you have the most impact on, are saying that what you're giving them is not what they want, that's daunting. That was very daunting. So we started out like many providers do. We started out by saying, okay, well, who has earned their right to this? Meaning, who is very skilled, who is very already accomplished, who really shouldn't be in the group home, so that those folks first will get their freedom. And because they'll be the easiest, they're the most skilled, and they're least involved with their disability. And that was probably the first big lesson, was that those people were not a group, a synonymous or homogeneous group at all, and were very unique in their own lifestyles and what they wanted in their life. And we didn't find it easy at all. And we also learned that we didn't know them. And that was hard to admit because some of these people we had supported for a decade or more. But when you support someone in a group, only know them in the context of the group, not really as an individual. So we started meeting people in a whole different way, and it was quite surprising, actually astonishing to us. And after that first year of closing down that first group home, we decided that we would, as a staff, study past civil rights movements in the United States. We wanted to understand, what does oppression really look like? How are there any common themes in a marginalized population? And so we spent a year, twice a month, and we looked at all kinds of groups, the American Indian, women, the LGBT community, as well as people of color. And one particular book we used a lot was Walking with the Wind by John Lewis, who worked with Martin Luther King. And that really crystallized things. That's when I think as a community at Hope House, we understood that oppression, regardless of the group, looks the same. It has the same elements. And those elements existed in the disability system. Keeping people poor, making sure that they have no money, limitation of choice, very few freedoms. All of those things were alive and well in the disability service system. And so at the end of that year, we said, okay, this isn't going to be about who's skilled or, who's screaming the loudest to get out. We're not going to run group homes. We're going to close every one of them. And we're going to start with the very basic premise that everyone with a disability, regardless of how it impacts them, has a right to have their own home and be supported in a manner that they direct. It was really that basic, but it was such a huge fundamental change. So it took us 10 years to close down the remaining 13 group homes, and that was 22 years ago. So are we very proud of that? Yeah, but we're also kind of surprised and maybe even a little bored that it is something to talk about still in 2018 as something new or something that should be considered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can think of many organizations that support people with developmental disabilities are starting this thinking. So
it's odd. It's odd to me.
Yeah. So for a question that came to mind is, I guess putting you back in 1984, you go and you ask the question, how do you want to live? You learn that those three common themes: people want their own home, they want a paying job, and they want friendship and romance, and that's how they want to live. So you're viewed as Hope House is viewed as the model for residential services for people with intellectual developmental disabilities in Virginia. You take that information, you sit down as a team, and you look at it, and you're like, okay, we're considered the model, and we're not serving our customers at all. Do we blow this up? Like, what was the conversation like around that table?
Well, spirited. That's what I recall. There was no one for us to look at and say, well, show us how you did it, or, examples. There were none. The system also had its rules and policies and funding mechanisms really set up on a group model as well. I think what really helped unstick us from the debate was involving everyone, not only people with disabilities, but all the direct support staff and community members, and start having those conversations like, what is the thinking about taking a label and putting people together, and what are the results of that? Because what we know is that housing for fill in the blank does not work. It does not work without diversity. We know that about the elderly being removed from younger people. We know that about people in poverty being removed from the middle class. We know that about special education, putting kids only with disabilities and keeping them away from everyone else. We know that it's not only not good for the person being segregated, but it's not good for the rest of the community or the rest of the school or the rest of the city either. And so that's what we started talking about, was not getting hung up on assessments or could this person cross the street or how much money would this kind of change cost. What we stayed on, and which is what I think helped drive us, was really the social justice aspect of it. That's where we stay focused. Why would people with disabilities have to live in groups when I'm not required to, or the person supporting them isn't required to? Why would they have to? And let's not talk about money, and let's not talk about skill. Let's just talk about the humanity of it. And once we stayed on that subject, then it really, I think we got very comfortable with the ambiguity of the whole undertaking. We were clear, we're not going to run group homes, so was it possible that every family member or every person with a disability left our services and said, well, if you're not going to do that, I'm not staying. Yes, I guess that was, but it never occurred to us to dwell on that. It just felt so clear. It just felt so clear that what we were doing was wrong, and we could no longer pretend that it was right.
Right. You kind of uncovered the truth and couldn't ignore it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It takes so much energy to try to ignore it, but we could not.
Right. And I think what you did in terms of going and asking the people that you serve, were serving at the time, what their needs were and what they wanted from a service, more or less, like how did they want to live, and that's the service you're providing. Any good business or organization would go in and find that information out from their customers, because in any kind of business context, I guess where the customer is paying you, if you're not providing a service that they're happy with, and that they're loving, then you're pretty quickly going to go out of business. And I understand the money flows a little bit differently in this context, but to me, that's also just good business.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, really, when people say, well, what kind of ideal direct support professional are you looking for? And the first thing we'll say is someone with great customer service skills. We've got to reorient this field to who really is the customer. And I think it's also, I think the other thing is what's made it really easy for this industry to look almost exactly the same in many instances as it did in the 70s, because what business really does? I mean, we can name any business that looks exactly the same as it did in the 70s. I mean, there's not many examples, but I think this industry has been able to do that without the pressure of this customer base, because of the nature around disability and also consistent oppression, into second class or even third class citizens. When you look at social justice change and who leads it, in almost every example we looked at, the people that were being oppressed led it. Mm-hmm. And in the disability, especially the intellectual disability industry, the very nature of the disability would require our support to lead a revolution. And we would be revolting against ourselves.
That's a really important point. As you mentioned, those other movements such as the empowerment of women, the Black rights movement, they all had very strong leaders from their own group or groups.
Yes.
And I think what I'm hearing from you, Lynne, is that it's our responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility to step up, to help amplify those voices of people with intellectual disabilities and to help them get that social justice, because it might be a little bit more challenging for someone within that group to step up and be that voice and push that movement forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we should engage, not necessarily based on, okay, can someone speak for themselves or not? I think we should engage because do we want communities, neighborhoods, and cities that are inclusive, or do we not? And if the answer is yes, we do, well, there's responsibility in that. And there's a huge group that is left out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess in the same topic around oppression. So you mentioned earlier the common traits of oppression, keeping people poor, limiting their choice, etc. To bring people out of oppression, do you what did you do? Do you just do the opposite? So do you help them build wealth? Do you give them choice or enable their ability to choice? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I can tell you what our journey was. Is the first thing that really changed things was people having their own home. We made assumptions. We made assumptions that, well, everybody will want a roommate. They will want a roommate. What we learned as soon as benefits started flowing, because they flow differently in the United States when you're a single person versus in an agency group home, the opposite was true. No one wanted a roommate except for people that were romantically involved, and so that's roommate isn't an appropriate description then. It's a boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, wife, husband. No one wanted a roommate. They wanted their own home. And what came with that was forcing us to say, okay, Joe, what kind of support do you need from us? And it was a disruption. I mean, it kind of flipped the table. And Joe telling us, this is what time I want to get up. This is what time I like to have my dinner if I need support. This is when I don't want to be disturbed. This is the kind of technology I want to access. It changed all of the conversations. They were being led, for the first time, at least in our history. I mean, we pretended that they were led by people with disabilities when we were in group homes, but that's just being person-centered in language only. This was in behavior, in reality. It was happening, So we'd say, look, we're coming in. We'd like to come in and help you with whatever. And the door's locked. Mm-hmm. They're saying it's not convenient time. Wait a minute, it's laundry night. Yeah, not tonight, not for me. My show's on. I mean, it was those basic, very subtle things collectively among 125 people that changed everything. So starting there, just having your own home. A lot of control comes with that. And, I think we chronically underestimate people with disabilities, and we rarely overestimate them. And we learned so much that people that we thought would struggle just spread their wings and flew, and people we thought would do fine struggled in certain areas that we would have never predicted. And that support isn't just a line, a straight line. It goes up and down. Lives are messy. You fall in love, support goes down. Your mother dies, support goes up. I mean, it's just life. Certainly a focus on employment, because having some economic power just opens up more choices, whether that be pursuing your unique leisure interest or being able to practice reciprocity in a friendship and say, no, I'll get lunch today or whatever. It is very empowering to have some money. And certainly the system was not promoting that at all. And then the third, which I think is probably what we started working on last, but has really had a shelf life of a very long time, is connection and belonging. Not having a service life, but having your life. That involves lots of people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing kind of that not formula, but the things that worked for you and for the people that you serve. I think one of the insights that I've had in and around oppression and the development, people with developmental disabilities, is they don't have to be living in an institution or living in a group home to be oppressed. And I kind of came to this conclusion looking at my own family and my sister, Sarah, who has a developmental disability. And quite frankly, Sarah is being oppressed. She asked me about a month ago, she says, Eric, how much money do I have? I'm like, that's not a question a 34-year-old woman should be asking her brother. She should know how much money is in her bank account. She should have control over her bank account, right? So it goes in that column of keeping people poor, right? And then limitation of choice. My parents still try and force their way in and make a lot of decisions about her life, and I stand up for her and help raise her voice up and help her to give her that power back. But I think that there's a lot more oppression going on than we really fully realize or acknowledge a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with you on that. You don't have to be, in a large institution to experience oppression, or you don't, you can be in an 8-bed group home and be very, very lonely and very, very isolated. So I absolutely agree with that. What we found with just people starting with their own home is it really started with us changing how we viewed people and how we interacted, and who was, who really was, like we mentioned, the customer. But also, when you're supporting people among people without disabilities, the universe has a way of moving along without you controlling it, or without us controlling it. The neighbor, after several weeks of seeing you, starts saying hello and nice weather, and I see you have a cat, and the natural rhythms that someone without a disability experiences happen, and they're good. Mm-hmm. They're good, and it's not dark and scary, and people with disabilities, I find, are underestimated in terms of their radar and their skill levels about how to just live their life. Mm-hmm. Very, very different way when you're not controlled. And criticism went up. That's funny. That was a kind of startling to us, is that when people started having choice about who worked with them, where they lived, what their days looked like, what their weekends looked like, criticism just skyrocketed, but then again, when you look at any oppressed population without freedom, when freedom is finally there, then that's when you see and hear the criticism. Being free allows for that. That's the sign that it's happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. As something to look for and to actually celebrate, rather than look at negatively.
Oh yeah, or like, now you have to do, I don't want eggs for breakfast. I want pizza. Right. I don't want to do my laundry tonight. I don't like this particular staff person. I don't have to say why. I just don't.
Yeah, I don't need to explain myself. It's just what I want. So
yes,
it's my life. So this is what we're going to do.
Exactly. And we say, again, all of these years we've allowed people with disabilities to wait for our enlightenment, when most of us are not very patient at all. But that's that sneaky thing about oppression, is it makes you think this is normal. It isn't. It isn't.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you had to change the way that you viewed people, and I think this was kind of organizationally you were inferring.
Yes.
What is it that had to change, or what were the perspectives that you had, and what did they shift to?
Well, probably the most dominant one was if you had that the level of disability or how it impacted your life related to how much you could direct your life. So getting rid of that stereotype. We support people today with very complex disabilities that don't use language to communicate, that have a number of devices that helps them live, that direct their life exceptionally well. And it requires, first, a belief that is to the core, that every single human being can direct their own life. And if you can't see the preferences, you can't hear what is making someone unhappy or happy, it's about you and not about them. I think that's a big thing in this field, is that people with complex disabilities could have to live in group settings or have to be controlled quite a bit. That is not true. All of us need certain things to be healthy, or all of us. And all of us have things we cannot do, such as replace the motor in our vehicle, or, put a filling in our own tooth. So it's not a new concept, but it is a new concept in the intellectual disability field, that, you have to have some kind of pass some test or have some assessment that the system will allow you to direct your own life. That's one thing that I think really changed for us. And also, I think we had this prejudice or bigotry because, when you value intellect and when you heavily value intellect and beauty, which most Western societies do, and many people with developmental or intellectual disabilities don't fit into those values that we see on TV or we see in the magazine. We like to have an advanced degree. We want senior in front of our title, and on and on. When you lift that up, what's underneath that is you don't really believe people with disabilities are your equal. And that's a hard thing to admit, but it was critical that we admitted it. And there's all kinds of things attached to that. Who would be friends with them? Who would want to be friends with them without hurting them or taking advantage? Who would genuinely like them? All of those strands come from that essential place of not believing that people with disabilities are your equal. Mm-hmm. And that took work. That was work, internal work, that every one of us has to do still.
Yeah, and that's not easy work to go do, to look deep down at your beliefs and what's been inculturated in our society and what we believe, and to acknowledge it and to really hold up that belief. And I'm just going to repeat what you said. Everybody had a belief that every human can direct their own life. And I think that that's such an important message to share.
Yes. And it's not something you can just write in a policy or engrave on a plaque and say that now it's so. I mean, it takes a lot of effort, extreme focus, and it is daily, by the minute, by the hour, by the person. Mm-hmm. For it to be alive.
Yeah. When you reflect back on all the people that you've served, is there an individual or a story that comes to mind that really kind of tested that belief? You're like, oh, I'm not sure if this person can direct their own life, and maybe how they proved you wrong. Is there any stories that come to mind?
Well, I mean, there's lots, but one in particular was about a guy named Willie, and he was a very large guy, weighed probably 350 pounds, and didn't like to bathe, and didn't like to wash his hair, on and on. So he'd go to the day center, and they'd call us up and say, well, he doesn't smell work ready, but, this is just a segregated day center with no real work, and if there is work, maybe you make $2 in a week. And so we went on and on with this, and, hassling and nagging him to, do his hygiene and lose weight. I mean, on the surface, right? Not things most people would disagree with. Yep, not healthy to be 350 pounds, not healthy to not bathe, and plus, just can isolate yourself by not doing that. So we felt very clear and very firm that, nothing else were we going to teach, nothing else did we want to discuss until we got those two things taken care of. And then we heard a woman named Jan, and she met Willie, and she said, I want to drop all of this hygiene stuff, this weight stuff. I just want to drop it all. I really just want to get to know him and, figure out who is he? And I was, at this point, I was like resistant to that because I was saying, look, this isn't how our competence is going to be judged. This isn't, he can't weigh this much. He can't not bathe. Well, he lives in a town called Norfolk, which is a big port town, huge shipping industry. And so it was after a meeting where the day center was admonishing us for him not coming once again to the day center smelling like roses. and Jan, at the end of that meeting, Jan looked at Willie, and I think they must have had some previous conversation. And he said, he wasn't real verbal. He said, I quit. And so Jan goes, well, I guess the meeting's over. So she leaves that day with Willie, and they go down to the docks, which was about 15 minutes from where this meeting was being held. And on that day, she helped get him a job as a dock worker, where everyone smelled like Willie. The only thing he was missing was the union tattoo, which he had within 6 months. And he went from being like this problem client to a valued citizen almost instantaneously, because that guy could lift those pallets all day long. He could work anytime because he had nothing going on in his life. So anytime a ship came in, he was pulling the overtime. He's still employed there, 3 promotions later. And, we talk about circles of support and all that. Well, those dock workers were the best thing that ever happened to him. I mean, we were probably spending close to $160,000 a year on really a service he did not want, but we felt so righteous in providing. And it went down to about $10,000 a year because, 1, he works a lot. 2, now he has some money, so he travels some. He DJs now on the weekend, and he has a support system. Those dock workers come to almost every gig he does. Now, when this happened for Willie, he was 46 years old. We'd already spent probably close to $6 million, $8 million on him of 10 years of misery. I don't want that to happen anymore.
To me, it's not about the money, though, either. It's about wasting 10 years of Willie's life.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yes, exactly. And he just took it. He lets us know, when he'll be home, when it's convenient for us to help him with his checking account or whatever, It's a totally different guy. But I wonder how many Willies are out there.
Yeah, and it sounds like from the story that what it took was for someone to listen to Willie and to understand him, and that's Jan, and to help him find his place.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is I think what Jan did is she said, okay, I'm not going to stay focused on what everybody believes is the proper standard here. I'm going to just stay focused on what does Willie want for his life. Mm-hmm. And if it's not bathing, okie dokie. If it's not losing weight, all right. What is it about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
no judgment.
Yeah. And if Willie bumps into that, girl he admires or a partner or whatever, then maybe he's going to decide to go shower himself, right?
Well, interesting enough, it was long after Jan had left, and Hector was supporting Willie, and he came to a staff meeting and announced that Willie had joined Weight Watchers the year before and had hit his goal, had lost 100 pounds. And people are whoop-wooing and clapping and all of this, and I said something like, Hector, what did we do? And Hector goes, oh, yeah, Lynn, it wasn't really us. That dive bar all those dock workers hang out at the end of Redgate? And I said, yeah, I'm familiar with it. And he goes, well, the waitress, Wanda, who works there with the gold tooth? Yeah, what? He goes, she just walked by him one night and said, you'd be kind of cute if you dropped some of that weight. I said, you're kidding me. Wanda with the gold tooth? And Hector goes, yeah, motivation. It's a funny thing.
Yeah. Too funny. Well, Lynne, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I want to be respectful of your time today. Is there a message or a thought that you want to leave our listeners with?
I guess the most important thing is I've already said it. I think it is all of our responsibility. It's all of our responsibility to work on ourselves around the issue of equality, the true equality that everyone has, regardless of disability, and then to take action for those that are still left on the sidelines.
Perfect. Awesome. Lynne, if folks want to learn more about Hope House or learn more about you or get in touch with you or the organization, what's the best way for them to do that?
Visit our website, which is at hope-house.org.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks so much, Lynne. I
Eric.
appreciate your time today,
Thank you.
It was a great conversation. So I appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
I'd like to share a big thank you to Lynne for having this conversation with me on the podcast and for standing up for people with disabilities to really try to share a lot of truths that she's uncovered with her experience at Hope House and to spread those. And I hope that you take into consideration those truths that Lynne shares and examine your own beliefs and figure out what's true for you. And I hope you think about how you can stand up and stand beside people with disabilities to break them free of oppression. And Lynne shared kind of the 3 ways that has worked for the Hope House organization and the work that they've done. So thanks for listening today. And next week, join us for my conversation with guest Brian Raymond King. And Brian is a coach, and he coaches people with disabilities and really helps them to focus in on their mindsets and to create mindsets that will lead them toward living a fulfilling life. So it was a fun conversation with Brian, speaking with another coach and geeking out on that a little bit. So you'll get a little bit of insight into the mindset of a coach and some of the questions that we ask our clients as coaches. So thanks for joining, and we will catch you in a couple of weeks. And thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. If you like this episode and you think you know someone that would benefit, please share it with them. Be a part of the change to think differently about disability.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Visit us at empoweringability.org for more podcasts and resources to help you and your loved ones impacted by disability build a full and meaningful life.